Hey, I'm Truman with Park Tool, and today we're talking a little bit about dropper posts. We are going to be talking about servicing a dropper post. This is going to be a little bit of a clean and grease. This post is from OneUp Components. It's a fairly simple post to service. So we're going to be walking through the service on this post. One of the main takeaways should be that your dropper post likely needs service. Almost every year. They say 50 to 100 hours you should at least be doing a clean and re-grease on one of these, and most of the time they're very simple. So on this one, the only tool that I do not have in front of me that you may need would be a strap wrench. And in this case, I think I'm gonna be able to get away without it. So you need a grease, so Sil Glide, Slick Honey, something like that, where it doesn't affect any kind of rubber. It also slides very easily and is for more of like a pneumatic hydraulic situation. You also need a lint-free cloth. I have a couple cotton swabs here just in case. I don't know exactly if I'm gonna need them or not. I have a pick, a 14mm open-end wrench, a 2.5mm hex, a 5mm hex, a set of needle nose, and some isopropyl alcohol. So what I'm gonna start with is I'm gonna first, in this case, because I don't have the strap wrench and I'm not gonna use a vise, I'm gonna try and loosen this collar with the seat on so it gives me leverage. So, I'm actually gonna remove my glove. Maybe we do need that strap wrench. There. So that is now loose. I'm just gonna leave that. I'm gonna remove the head of this post. The head, we're just gonna clean it and re-lube it. For this particular head, there is a bolt in the back and the bolt in the front. If you just remove the back bolt, you can leave the front one, and once you torque that rear bolt back down to no more than 8 Newton meters, it will bring your seat angle back to where it was. So that's a fun little tip. So we'll just be loosening this back one until there's a little recess on it, and we can unclip it. So. You can kind of see right here, that little recess, the slot. We're gonna pull this out. Just like that. Now we see that, the head, the bottom, the top. Something interesting here is that these both have arrows, and the arrows point forward. Clean the rails. I'm gonna set this aside. Clean where the rails go in the clamp assembly, and just clean the whole clamp assembly overall. This will prevent any kind of creaking or any kind of issues you have there. Definitely a good thing to do. Because if you get a piece of sand in there, it can get a little gritty, and then you'll get a creak, and that is not the most fun thing to have going on. All right. So you can see the top of the post here. See that? It's a little dirty, so we're gonna clean that whole top assembly here. Just do an overall clean on the post. One of the big goals here is keeping things very clean, so that's why a lint-free cloth is important. Right here I'm using a microfiber. All right, so here we're left with our seat post. This is already loose. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this just a little bit through its travel. We're gonna undo this collar. So that collar is free. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold this in our left hand and break this free. Should be able to undo this with our hands here. So push this up towards the top, push this towards the top, little bumper. So then there's these little black bolts here. Kind of see right here and here. And they're threaded on this side, but on the back side, they're more of a pin. So take these out. Oh boy, those are 2s. So these are 2mm hexes and not 2.5mm hexes. You can see it's kind of a pin with threads. Now, top comes off. There it is. As we pull things off, like we talked about, we're going to clean them up. Fairly clean there. Actuator rod there. Put it that way. All right. Now we're left with the rest of our seat post. We can just take this post, slide it off the end. Look in there, make sure there's no pins left. And when I'm talking about these pins, we're talking about these right here, these very small brass pins. These pins are what clock your upper post and the stanchion to the lower post. So when you feel an excessive amount of play in your post, it's because these pins were either missized or they're worn or they're just loose tolerance. So these pins control how much play you have back and forth in your saddle. So these are important. And I'm gonna pull these out. We're gonna do a very good cleaning on them. And then we're gonna reinstall these ones because this particular post was very, the post was very tight and the seat did not have any slop in it. So these pins are in good condition. Then we have these bushings. This bottom bushing is timed with the pins. And then we have an upper bushing. So I'm gonna take this bottom bushing off here. And we're gonna clean under it. Pull this top off. Clean this major assembly up here. All right, then before getting too much further, clean inside the tube. Very clean. All right, cool. We'll set that aside as well. Now, one of the most important pieces that I find to make sure that it's clean and make sure everything's working well is this DU bushing and the upper collar assembly. So this, what can happen is there can be an excessive amount of buildup in there. You can see there's some dirt on it. See, there's some wear down there. So this, and there's some buildup on the inside in there. We're gonna wanna make sure that we clean this as best possible and that we reassemble it and put a little bit of grease in there. Not an excessive amount, but not too little. I'm gonna actually pull this little spring out, the metal O-ring off. We're gonna take this, do an initial pass without the alcohol, get kind of the big stuff off. Clean, clean, clean. That's the name of the game here. Clean, clean, clean. Put this back on. Little O-rings, they just snap on. It's very similar to the wiper on a fork here. So under here we go. I'm gonna start lubing. Put my glove back on. So in here, wiping the grease around the inside. There's a little spot in there. You can put a little excess grease. That's not a bad thing. It'll kind of have a little bit of a reservoir then to take from. But you don't want a ton of it built up in there. So this is cleaned and re-greased. Put it over here in a clean spot. Taking our pins, our bushing, our bushings. And the good thing is we're not seeing any damage in here. We're not seeing a lot of wear. This is very much a clean and reassemble. So we're not seeing any glaring issues. Some glaring issues that you may see is if on this DU bushing, if there's any distinct wear marks. You know, we saw a little bit, but nothing excessive. If you see any excessive wear in this rod right here, that would be a bad thing. It would be, it's rubbing on the inside and there might be damage to an O-ring or a seal. Anything like that, any damage like that that you see, you should you can get repair parts from the manufacturer. All right, we're all clean here. So now we're gonna start our reassembly process. So we're gonna need our grease, we need all of our pieces, and we're gonna start getting this back together. So on here, we're gonna put our top DU bushing, upper seal assembly back on here. Right up here. You can feel how much stiction. It should be smooth. Should be a light amount of resistance. But that's this. All right, so now we're ready to put our upper bushing back on. Before we slide it up, I want to put a little bit of grease on underneath it so that that bushing has some nice grease to slide on. All right. So we've got that on. Now our pins. So these pins, a couple different things you can do. You can fill these channels with some grease. And then these, I've lightly greased them already, so we'll stick them in there. Perfect, and that grease will actually help them stay in place, and it'll also help them last longer, provide some protection. And we're gonna keep them up at the, so they have this range, keep them up at the top. So, take that bushing. Now this lower bushing, I'm gonna put a light coat of grease in this gland underneath there. And I'm gonna take this, put it on, slip it over. And then you'll notice there are little notches in there. You need to line those up with the pins. So the pin needs to be lined up with the notch in the lower bushing. All right, so now we're ready to start putting this back together. So the back of the post is, when you look at this, this is kind of flared up or at that angle. This is the back of this upper stanchion. It's not crucial that this goes in the right direction, but it's attention to detail. It's not going to affect the function of the post to not have this timed correctly, but to get it back to where it was and looking in the correct way, you want the 180, which is how long the travel is, and then behind here is the OneUp logo. You want that on the back. That also comes along with all of the text. So this being the back of the upper side of the post, this being the back of the lower section of post, we can throw that right back on just like that. So now I'm gonna slide this. See, it slides really nice now. And what we can do is we'll take our foam, we'll put that on, and put a little grease under it. And we take our push rod. Push rod goes up and in. And this is your actuator. This push rod actually pushes on a switch in the top on that cartridge. And that is how your dropper works. Some blue stuff on here. All right. Now, the lower actuator assembly goes back on, and our little threaded pins, they go in just like so. 2mm hex wrench tightens those down. Snug them up. I was not able to find a torque spec on those necessarily, so somewhere around 3-ish Newton meters. This is a little bit loose, so it just needs to be, those kind of hold it onto a relief on this post. So now I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna tighten this down, use our 14mm wrench. Snug this down. Take the top here, run this down. Tighten this top collar. And that's it. We just cleaned and re-greased this post. Should be working great, but before we reassemble it, let's just verify. So initially, remember we had to push the travel of this down a little bit, just so it's not, the bushings aren't resting above the top. So now we should be able to push this button and it should go out quite quickly. So I'm gonna clean this again, the rest of it. We can then actuate it. Relief. Boom. So this post has been cleaned, re-greased, reassembled. It's functioning just fine. At this point, check your air pressure, get your saddle reinstalled, but your post should be in excellent condition. You've had an opportunity to check through it. It didn't take a bunch of complex tools, fairly simple tools that you'll have at home. I hope you gleaned something from this. If you have anything to add, put it in the comments. Somebody might be able to learn something from what you have to say. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time on Park Tools YouTube channel.